My name is Osobe Waberi. I am a 22-year-old journalist and freelance writer. Right now I am working at CBC News, the marketplace. I had done work at Vice News in the past as their staff reporter. So I reported on everything happening in Toronto. Part-time, I am a poet when I have time to write poetry and not articles. So I published my first poetry book called God, Women, and Poets. It's available on Amazon for purchase. Yeah, so it's a book about my experiences with God, with women, and with poetry and poets around me and how they impacted my life. I am born in Canada, Toronto. Been here for 22 years. My parents decided to move to Canada for themselves because they were really young at the time. So they came here to get an education. Their family sent them to kind of go out and get a better life. They chose Canada because it's diverse, there's a lot of opportunity here. The evolution of my dreams and ambitions did really change. Growing up, I didn't have a lot, which was ironic because my parents were so educated and always dreaming about things. And so I was the opposite of that. I'm like, what am I doing? I'm not that smart. So I did struggle in school a lot with reading and writing, but over time, things did change. I think I got my first book and I just started reading, and from then it was an avalanche. I was reading nonstop for 3 years, almost addicted to books. That's where I picked up all the ambitions, and my creativity came from that. And then with reading came the writing, and then it came with public speaking because you're learning new words and you're more confident. And then with that came wanting to learn about other people's experiences. While reading books, you're learning about people and how they live their lives. It made me really curious about other people in the real world, and that's where journalism came from. One of the biggest situations I had to face as a woman of color, a Muslim woman, would be realizing that sometimes I'm going to be the only one in the room who looks the way that I do, and that's just something you have to deal with. So whether that's in internships or working at a media company, I have to get used to being the only person like me in the room. So there's power in that, but then there's also weakness because human beings want to feel a part of something. So when you don't look like everyone else or have the same experiences as everyone else, it could be difficult to kind of navigate through that system. So that would be the hardest thing I had to deal with. But I've also seen that there's a lot of power that comes from that because there are things that I understand that somebody else might not, or there are things that I could shed light on that someone would not have the ability to do. And that makes my job kind of fun because I get to report on things that I understand more or that I have a bigger passion for that someone else would not necessarily understand or be confident enough to take on. A bold decision that I think that I'm the most proud of would be the fact that I'm always trying to be creative, and that's not something that a lot of people know how to do sometimes. A lot of people like to kind of follow the status quo and be very like everybody else, but I'm always learning and trying to try new things and understand new things, and that kind of led me to writing my first book. So it's a poetry book called God, Women, and Poets. So this led me to writing that because I was so creative with everything that I was doing, whether that was reading or talking to people. This book is based on my experiences with God, women in my life, and poets and poetry in general. My experiences with those people and with the things that I was learning while being creative led to me writing and experiencing life the way that I'm doing now. So the quote of I didn't come this far to only come this far, for me that would mean I didn't get to where I was or where I want to be to just stay there. You want to do more and more and more, and sometimes it's a really good thing. There are times in my life where I would go back to some of my lists of things that I wanted to accomplish and by accident just find them, and then I'd read them and I'd be like, that was it? That was the big goal you wanted to do? Because you've come so far as a person, right? So you've learned so many things. So going back on the mentality that you had before and thinking that was as far as I could get, that's the big dream, and then surpassing it is such a beautiful experience. And that reminds me of you don't come this far to just stay at whatever it was that you wanted to do, because you learn that you want to do so much more than that, and then you push for that and you push for that. So there's just no end in sight. I think it's always hard for people to convince their parents that they're making the right decision in their lives, because your parents want the best for you, right? They want you to do what will make you successful. And if you think that that's what you want to do in your life, it could be anything. For me, it was journalism. It's really hard convincing your parents that you got this and that, you'll make it work. I grew up watching the news with my dad every single day. My dad loves the news. I'm even working at TBC in the place that we used to watch all the time. So we used to watch the marketplace religiously, we loved it. And now I work there. That's been really crazy. And I think that has showed him that okay, she's okay. She doesn't need as much guidance from me as I thought she did in the beginning. I raised her good enough for her to be able to do it on her own. Showing your parents that you know what you're gonna do and that you're gonna do it right and you will make them proud. So I had to kind of compromise with my dad. So I wanted to do journalism, but not exactly news journalism. I wanted to do more fashion journalism, the fun stuff, but I had to compromise. So he's like, you know what, go to U of T. It's a good school to make me happy. And do news because that's like the best kind of journalism, the most impact. So that's our compromise in a way. And I love it now. I started to love it. So I love doing news. I love reporting on crimes and housing and stories about international students, gun violence in Toronto. I thought it would be boring, but it's kind of really interesting to me now in a good way, not in the like, I love reading about that or writing about that, but bringing that to people and actually making an impact. And it challenges me to like learn about transit if I have to write about it. So you don't just write about anything out of nowhere, you have to study it. You have to become that thing that you're writing about. Once I was interviewing a woman from St. Kitts Hospital. I had to really get into her mindset, learn about what she was doing. And I stopped going to science classes in grade 10. So I had to kind of go right back to my roots and try to figure that thing out before I wrote about it. So I had to kind of become a research person just to write that story. So I'm always jumping into new roles anytime I'm writing about something, and that's important to me. In 3 to 5 years, which is not that far away, I think I would probably hope to have a full-time job at a huge media company and write stories that are important to me. So exactly the list I mentioned before, housing, crime, international stories. I'd like to write about things like that. And then maybe in another 10 years, I'd like to be in different countries reporting on wars and reporting on famines and climate change and things like that that interest me. One thing I pretty much always tell everyone that I meet, you shouldn't plan for anything, you should prepare for it. Whether you believe in God or a higher power, you can plan your life to the T, I mean from A to Z. You'll find out that none of that will happen or all of that will happen and more. You can't plan your life, but all you can do is prepare for the opportunities that you're gonna get and make sure that when they come, you're ready for them. For me, it's not about picking a media corporation that I want to work for and saying that's where I want to go. That doesn't help me. I want to prepare for the day that I get that opportunity, making sure that I'm educated, I'm being ethical in the way that I'm writing. That way, when that opportunity comes, I'm prepared for it and not just planning for it. It's very easy to plan, but it's not easy to prepare for something. My name's Osobe Waberi, and I didn't come this far to only come this far. I never let anybody